Hi there, and good afternoon. I'm John.
I'm Zen. And I'm Julie.
We're with cNation, and you are tuned in to the 50 Days of Cannabis podcast, where we examine the cannabis laws in each of the 50 states.
Oh, hold on, John. You missed one.
I did. The District of Columbia is also included in this. We just thought 50 days sounded a little better than 51. Today we're looking at the cannabis laws in Idaho. The gem state, which happens to be my home state, has some very tough cannabis laws on its books and isn't particularly friendly or compassionate to cannabis users, growers, and distributors. Zen, tell us what some of those laws look like.
Possession of less than 3 ounces in Idaho is a misdemeanor with up to a year in jail and a max fine of $1,000.
Well, that's not too bad.
More than 3 ounces but less than a pound is a felony. You'll get up to 5 years and a max fine of $10,000. Any possession in amounts more than a pound is considered possession with the intent to distribute.
Well, I thought that intent to distribute really means like scales, baggies, and small bills. In this state, it's different.
Yep, just having a pound means you're going to distribute it. It's a felony charge, complete with a 1-year mandatory minimum prison sentence and as many as 5, depending on the weight.
Do they have any medical?
Nope, Idaho doesn't have any medical cannabis.
Of course they don't. So, boo, Idaho. Hey, let me talk about a couple of things here that you mentioned regarding possession. And the first thing is that 1 pound. That 1 pound is considered intent to distribute. It's not that much. I mean, if you saw a pound, you'd be like, oh, that's a lot of marijuana. You know, and volume-wise, I suppose it's a lot, but it doesn't weigh that much, and it's just not that much. But to consider such a small amount as an intent to distribute, like you couldn't be in possession of that much for any other reason, is really indicative of Idaho's hostile nature and intention towards cannabis users, growers, etc. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And the other is this mandatory sentencing. So we see that a lot. There's mandatory minimums, and this is pretty, to have a mandatory on something, on a possession amount that low is a little bit scary. But in Idaho, the judges are actually really handcuffed when it comes to mandatory sentencing, and in this instance, in that intent to distribute, that's a 1-year mandatory prison sentence with as many as 5 years. So the judge in Idaho has some leeway between that 1 year and that 5 years, but that 1 year is guaranteed. Judges in Idaho cannot come off their mandatory minimums whatsoever. Another thing I want to talk about when we're talking about these crazy sentencing laws is paraphernalia in Idaho. So we expect in most states that if you are using a pipe or something like that, you get pulled over, you're going to get the possession charge. You're going to get a paraphernalia charge because you were using the pipe to enjoy that cannabis. And in Idaho, like a lot of other states, that's a misdemeanor. In Idaho, it's up to a year in jail, and it's up to a $1,000 fine. Pretty standard. We see that in most states where paraphernalia is concerned. What we don't see in most states where paraphernalia is concerned is the sale or the manufacture of paraphernalia. That can get you up to 9 years in prison because it's a felony and a fine of up to $30,000.
Wow. So making a pipe.
Ridiculous. Making a pipe.
Wow.
There are talented glass.
Yeah. We know some.
So crazy. It's so ridiculous to be facing, to just be making that, you're committing a felony. Just making it, you're committing a felony.
So
anyway.
if I'm making an apple, a pipe, gonna eat the evidence away.
Right, eat the evidence if you're using an apple pipe in Idaho. That's what we have to say about that.
Well, I gotta tell you, you doing all this, you gotta have
the
the
safe paraphernalia you may have.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Tell us about distribution and cultivation, please.
The sale or delivery of any amount of cannabis in Idaho, of course, is a felony and mandatory sentencing to the guidelines. Anyone charged with sale or distribution in Idaho can expect to be incarcerated between 1 to 5 years, mandatory, and a maximum fine of $50,000.
Crazy.
Yep. And so the growers, the law governing cannabis cultivation in Idaho, which are similar to the sales and distribution laws, any number of plants is, of course, a felony, and a mandatory sentencing between 1 to 5 years in prison, mandatory. Sorry, I said that again. Maximum fine of $50,000. So those laws are they're intense.
It is. And it bears repeating. Mandatory, mandatory, mandatory. You are going to prison in Idaho if you get caught with cannabis.
Yep.
Now, their school zone laws are also pretty crazy. And this mandatory minimum on these school zone laws is going to flip your lid. But this is an area at cNation that we're pretty... What's the right word here? We are in favor of harsh school zone laws. We do applaud them because they serve one purpose in the community. Lawmakers in every state make these laws really harsh. You know, generally with possession, you've got a small amount in your pocket and you're just walking through a school zone, you're generally good. And in Idaho, there's no possession in a school zone. But intent to distribute, actual distribution, or cultivation in a school zone, and that's 1,000 feet around a school, is a mandatory minimum 5 years in prison. 5 years and a $30,000 fine for a school zone infraction. Or I'm sorry, it's not an infraction, it's a felony, a school zone felony. And that's a 5 to life charge with 5 mandatory minimum. You're going to do a nickel in prison. Now, you get cracked in a school zone selling. We're not too sympathetic if you've got to go to prison for 5 years. It is a harsh sentence, but let me tell you what.
Find another place to sell it.
Yeah, you have been informed. Idaho is tough on cannabis. It's tough on people that embrace the cannabis culture. And as ridiculous as we think some of their laws are, particularly these low amounts of cannabis and these large amounts of fines, the school zone laws, yeah, you're informed. Stay out of school zones with your cannabis. Don't sell them. Don't, all of that.
For a more comprehensive look at Idaho's cannabis laws, please visit us at cNation.com and click on the state-by-state link. Remember, you have rights if you're arrested for any cannabis-related reasons. You have the constitutional right to remain silent until your attorney is present. If you don't have an attorney, ask for one.
This is Julie.
This is John.
And Zen.
With cNation, bringing you a snapshot of Idaho's cannabis laws. Be safe.
Stay informed.
Yeah.
The 50 Days of Cannabis podcast is a copyrighted production of the South American Gold Corporation.
We appreciate your likes and shares on social media.
Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at cNation Channel.